Imagine making exactly 6 cents on a $40 product.
Yeah, that is a really rough thought.
Right. But for thousands of Shopify merchants, that isn't some, abstract nightmare scenario. It is literally just a Tuesday. So today we are doing a deep dive into how the seemingly simple act of, well, turning on wholesale pricing can quietly bankrupt an otherwise highly successful direct-to-consumer business.
It is a brutal reality check,
Oh.
honestly, because most merchants, I mean, they assume that B2B e-commerce is really just retail with like a volume discount applied to it.
Right.
They look at what it costs to make an item, they pick a lower number, and they just publish it. But the underlying mechanics of wholesale are entirely different.
I mean, when I think about wholesale, I always picture this massive inherent divide. Like on one side, you have a gritty, dusty warehouse full of pallets, forklifts, cardboard boxes, all that stuff.
Oh yeah, very industrial.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have this sleek, glowing Shopify Analytics dashboard tracking consumer clicks. And bridging those two worlds is incredibly messy. Setting wholesale prices isn't just, slapping a 50% discount on your retail price and calling it a day.
No, absolutely not. And if you approach it that way, you are walking straight into a trap. Guessing a number based on gut feeling means you are flying completely blind to the actual operational costs that scale behind the scenes.
Which is exactly why our mission for this deep dive is to extract the absolute most critical evidence from a very comprehensive guide we have today. It's titled Shopify Wholesale Pricing: How to Set, Build, and Enforce B2B Prices That Hold Margin.
It's a fantastic resource, yeah.
It really is. So we are going to build a foolproof pricing stack from the ground up, tailored exactly for you listening, so you can walk away with a highly functional, practical understanding of B2B e-commerce math. Okay, let's unpack this. And let's start with the very first pitfall almost every merchant faces. They open up Shopify, they look at their catalog screen, and they literally ask, what number do I put here?
And that is entirely the wrong first question to ask.
Really? Why is that?
Because before you even touch a number, before you even look at the dollars and cents, you have to establish the architecture of the price itself. You cannot run the math without knowing exactly how that price is going to behave out in the wild,
Oh, I see.
Yeah, a pricing model dictates how your price varies. Does it vary by the identity of the buyer? Does it vary by the quantity they order? Or, is it locked to a specific long-term contract? You have to choose the model first because that model dictates how the software is actually going to enforce the transaction technically.
So basically, picking a pricing model is like picking the chassis for a truck.
Oh, I like that.
Right. You don't pick the payload weight, which would be the discount percentage, until you know if you're driving a nimble little pickup truck or a massive 18-wheeler, because they handle the weight of your margins completely differently.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. And the source material lays out several distinct chassis that you can choose from. The first, and honestly the most common for beginners, is a flat percentage off retail. Say like a global 40% off everything in the store.
Which sounds easy to set up, but I imagine it completely erodes your margin on items that don't cost much to produce, right? Like it applies the exact same blunt instrument to a cheap accessory as it does to your flagship product.
Precisely. It offers zero incentive for the buyer to increase their basket size, which is a huge missed opportunity.
Right.
Then, moving up a bit in complexity, you have tiered volume pricing. This is where the discount dynamically grows based on how many units they buy.
Okay, so like a bulk discount.
Exactly. So maybe it's 25% off if they buy 12 units, but it jumps to 45% off if they buy a gross of, say, 144. It actively rewards larger orders and pushes buyers toward your preferred case packs.
Okay, got it. And then there is Keystone, which I hear thrown around constantly. That is essentially the traditional retail floor, right?
Yeah, Keystone is a straight 50% off the retail tag. It's the absolute standard in industries like apparel, cosmetics, or giftwares. It exists because it allows the brick-and-mortar retailer to buy your product, mark it up 100%, and hit their own baseline margin goals just to keep their lights on.
Let me stop you there, though, because I want to make sure we're grounding this for the listener. If I'm selling, I don't know, hand-poured artisan candles, Keystone makes total sense. Boutiques expect to buy a candle for $15 and sell it for $30.
Sure.
But if I'm selling high-end consumer electronics where my own margins are razor thin to begin with, maybe like 15%, a Keystone model would literally put me out of business on the very first order.
That is a critical distinction, and it perfectly introduces the alternative, which is the cost-plus model. This is margin-first pricing.
Margin first. Okay, how does that work?
Instead of working backward from your public retail price, You start at your landed cost of goods sold, your COGS, and you add a fixed margin on top. It completely decouples your wholesale price from your retail price.
Oh, wow. Which would be highly useful if your retail pricing constantly fluctuates with sales or differs vastly by geographic region. You wouldn't want your wholesale buyers riding the roller coaster of your consumer marketing promotions.
Exactly. You want stability there. And finally, there's the contract or negotiated model. This is a highly unique, customized price list mapped to a single specific account.
Like for huge buyers.
Right, it's usually reserved for massive national distributors who demand specialized terms.
It's quite a menu of options, honestly. But merchants don't necessarily have to pick just one rigid model for their entire business, do they?
No, and understanding that flexibility is absolutely vital. Most advanced merchants, especially those operating on Shopify Plus, utilize a hybrid system.
So they mix and match them.
Yeah, exactly. They might deploy a flat percentage discount for their default everyday catalog to make onboarding easy. But then they will layer on aggressive tiered volume pricing for their top 20 hero SKUs to incentivize moving massive pallets of their best inventory.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And simultaneously, they'll use custom contract pricing for a handful of their biggest enterprise distributors. The goal is to establish a primary baseline model, so every subsequent decision has a solid foundation.
Okay, so we have our chassis built. We know what kind of truck we're driving. Now we really need to talk about the payload. And this is the section of the guide where the math can secretly, quietly destroy your business if you aren't paying close attention. Let's look at the brutal math of margins.
This brings us back to the 6-cent reality check you mentioned earlier.
Yes. Because the formula for a profitable wholesale price isn't just, retail minus discount. It is a remarkably strict cost stack. According to the guide, the actual formula is net unit margin equals the wholesale price, minus your cost of goods sold, minus your fulfillment costs, minus your credit card processing rate applied to that wholesale price, minus your channel cost.
That is a lot of minuses. Let's walk through that slowly with a real-world example from the text, just so you can really process the arithmetic. Imagine you have a product that retails direct-to-consumer for $40.
Okay, $40.
And you decide to apply that standard Keystone 50% discount we just discussed. Your wholesale price is now $20.
Okay, $20 top-line revenue per unit. So far, the math feels totally normal. I'm making $20.
But here comes the cost stack. Out of that $20, you first have to subtract your $14 COGS. That's what it actually costs you to manufacture and land the item.
Yikes. So I'm instantly down to $6.
Right. Now, you must subtract a $4 fulfillment allowance for warehouse picking, packing, and outbound freight.
So I am down to $2. This is dropping fast.
It really is. Next, subtract your 2.2% Shopify B2B credit card processing fee, which on a $20 item is about 44 cents. You are sitting at $1.56.
Okay.
Finally, subtract a $1.50 channel cost.
Wait, pause. What exactly is a channel cost in this context?
It represents the per-order share of your B2B software tooling. So like the monthly fees for your dedicated wholesale apps, your portal software, or your Shopify Plus platform fees, but amortized down to the individual order level.
Oh, I see. Which brings the per-unit net margin crashing down from $20 to exactly 6 cents. Here's where it gets really interesting. If I am making literally 6 cents on a product that retails for $40, why would anyone even bother with wholesale? It sounds like a remarkably fast track to working incredibly hard just to go completely broke.
What's fascinating here is the underlying mechanism of amortization. The reason the wholesale business model actually works isn't found in the per-unit margin in isolation. It is all about how you spread out fixed costs.
Spread them out how?
Well, if we look closely at our example, the cost of goods sold and the credit card fee are variable costs. They scale proportionately with every single unit you sell. But that $4 fulfillment cost and that $1.50 channel cost, that combined $5.50, is a fixed operational cost per order.
Per order, not per item.
Exactly. If a wholesale buyer treats your portal like a regular retail checkout and orders just one single unit, that fixed $5.50 cost eats almost the entire margin, leaving you with a pathetic 6 cents.
Wow, that completely flips the traditional retail logic. Like, a global 40% off rule across your entire catalog is basically an invisible trap. It might work perfectly fine on an $80 premium item where there is enough margin to absorb the fixed costs, but it will literally bankrupt you on an $8 accessory because that fixed fulfillment cost swallows the margin whole.
Hmm.
You aren't like punishing the buyer for ordering one unit. You are simply mathematically unable to subsidize the box and the labor.
Yes. Which brings us perfectly to the mechanism that actually saves your margins from the 6-cent nightmare.
Yeah.
And that is the minimum order quantity, or MOQ, and the implementation of case packs. Allowing wholesale buyers to purchase single unit at a massive discount is financial suicide. You have to force bulk buying, and you have to do it elegantly within the technical constraints of the Shopify ecosystem.
Okay, let's run that same math again, but apply the fix. So if
Yeah.
you take that exact same $40 product and instead of allowing the sale of one unit, you force the buyer to purchase a 12-unit case pack. Suddenly, that heavy $550 fixed cost is spread across a dozen items instead of just one. That same SKU that was making you 6 cents now returns about $61 in total order margin, which comes out to roughly $5.10 in profit per unit.
That is exactly right. And this is perhaps the most critical insight for anyone building out a B2B channel. Quantity rules are not just, an arbitrary setting you toggle in your admin panel to annoy buyers. They are a fundamental structural part of the price itself. A 50% discount offered without a strict quantity rule isn't actually wholesale. It is just a heavily discounted retail order that bleeds your company dry.
It's like buying hot dogs and buns at the grocery store.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you make them by the exact 12-pack increment. To do this technically on Shopify, the guide notes you must set the minimum order quantity to your case pack size, say 12, but critically, you also have to set the increment rule to the case pack.
Yes, that is a huge detail.
Right, so the buyer can order 12, 24, or 36, but the software physically prevents them from ordering an awkward 13 units. Because if they order 13, it forces your warehouse team to break open a perfectly sealed case, pull out one single item, and spend expensive labor hours relabeling everything.
Exactly. You eliminate that relabeling cost entirely, thereby protecting your published unit cost. And if you are running on Shopify Plus, you actually have the ability to cap the maximum order quantity on your highest performing hero SKUs.
But wait, if the whole goal of wholesale is to move volume, why on earth would a merchant want to stop someone from buying more of their best product?
Because it is all about supply chain protection.
Yeah.
Imagine a scenario where you have limited inventory of your best-selling item. You might cap a single self-serve B2B order at, say, 288 units. This stops a single aggressive wholesale buyer from logging in and completely cannibalizing the stock that you intended to distribute among 20 other distinct retail accounts.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, if that massive buyer wants more than 288 units, the system forces them into a custom draft order flow where a human sales rep can negotiate lead times and manufacturing runs without destroying your immediate inventory.
So it's basically a digital guardrail. Okay, so at this point in the life cycle, we've built the truck chassis with our pricing model, we've loaded the payload with proper margin math, and we've ensured the suspension won't break by enforcing case packs. We are safe, right? We can just sit back, let the buyers check out, and watch the revenue roll in.
Unfortunately, no, not quite.
Of course not.
The life cycle of the order doesn't end at the cart. The operational leaks surrounding the checkout process can still bleed those carefully engineered margins completely dry before the cash ever actually hits your bank account. We have to examine the silent margin killers, net terms and freight.
Okay, let's start with net terms, because I think a lot of merchants view payment terms as just like a polite administrative detail, but a wholesale price quoted net 30, meaning the buyer has 30 days after invoice to actually pay you, is mathematically not the same as a price quoted pay at checkout.
Not at all. Providing net 30 is essentially extending a short-term, unsecured loan to another business.
Wow, yeah.
If your company's own cost of capital is around 10% annually, offering a net 30 payment term acts as a silent 0.8% discount on your invoice. If you are dealing with a massive big box retail chain that demands net 90 terms, that is a 2.5% hit to your margin that is completely invisible on the price tag. It just vanishes from your bottom line.
But if net 30 is secretly costing us almost 1% in capital, shouldn't we just demand payment at checkout for absolutely everyone? Like, if we force credit cards up front, we save that margin.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, demanding payment at checkout introduces massive friction for traditional B2B buyers. Wholesale purchasers are accustomed to managing their own complex cash flow using supplier terms.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so if you force them to pay up front, you might save 1% on capital, but you could lose a $50,000 account entirely. The strategic compromise the guide recommends is highly effective, though. Price your headline catalog assuming absolutely everyone will use Net 30. Build that cost into the baseline math. But then explicitly offer a 1.5% early payment discount if they pay the invoice within 10 days, a net 10.
Ah, I see. So if they take the net 10, it recovers your capital cost immediately by getting cash in the door faster. It psychologically rewards the buyer with a discount. And most importantly, you don't have to constantly reprice your entire Shopify catalog based on how fast a specific buyer tends to pay.
Exactly. It's a behavioral incentive disguised as a pricing mechanism.
Really?
Now, the second silent killer at checkout is freight. Applying your direct-to-consumer retail shipping logic to a wholesale cart will absolutely destroy your margin.
Okay, let me put on my consumer hat here. Free shipping on orders over $50. That is the golden rule of retail e-commerce. But if you try to fit a massive pallet of case packs into that retail free shipping pickup truck, the math collapses entirely. But here's the problem. If you just go into Shopify and globally turn off free shipping to protect your wholesale margins, your direct-to-consumer retail shoppers will instantly abandon their carts. How do you separate the wholesale buyer's cart from the retail buyer's cart on the exact same website?
It requires separating your shipping profiles at the technical level within Shopify. You cannot let B2B buyers access retail shipping rates. Instead, you utilize B2B specific profiles. You can use Freight Collect, where the buyer actually pays the freight carrier directly using their own FedEx or UPS account number.
Oh, so they just handle it themselves.
Exactly. Or you can implement a flat per case matrix. For example, charging $18 a case to shipping zone 1 and $32 a case to shipping zone 5. So the cost is totally predictable. Or, if you absolutely must offer a freight allowance to stay competitive, you set the threshold incredibly high. We're talking free shipping only on orders over $1,500 or $2,000.
That makes total sense. And it isn't just freight that leaks margin at checkout, is it? There are other operational headaches, specifically taxes and samples. The source material is very clear here. You must collect tax IDs up front during the buyer onboarding process.
Oh, absolutely.
You attach those IDs to the buyer's profile so their invoices are automatically zero rated for sales tax. Because if you accidentally charge a wholesale buyer sales tax, their invoice isn't fully deductible on their end, and they will simply go find another supplier who has their administrative paperwork in order.
Yes. And regarding samples, the golden rule is to never give out free samples.
Really? Never?
Never. Free samples invite endless tire kickers who have absolutely no intention of placing a bulk order. Either charge a fixed administrative fee, like $50 to cover your warehouse labor and shipping, or charge them full retail for the sample, but promise to credit that exact amount against their first actual wholesale order. It instantly validates that they are a serious, capitalized buyer.
Okay, so let's track the life cycle to the end. You've engineered this highly profitable, well-protected wholesale cart. The math works, the shipping is covered, the payment terms are optimized. The product finally arrives at the buyer's physical store. But how do you ensure these wholesale buyers don't take your heavily discounted product, turn around, slash the public price on their own e-commerce website, and completely cannibalize your direct-to-consumer retail business? We have to guard the gates, right?
This raises an important question about the fundamental tension between retail and wholesale. In retail, transparency is generally considered good for consumers. But transparency is absolutely deadly for B2B negotiations. If your public retail tag becomes the undisputed negotiating floor for every wholesale buyer.
Right. And the single biggest leak on any hybrid Shopify store is showing both the retail price and the wholesale price to anonymous visitors. I mean, if a prospective wholesale buyer can scrape your site and see your exact retail margins without even logging in or proving they are a real business, you have lost all your negotiating leverage before the conversation even begins.
Which is precisely why you must deeply gate your wholesale catalog. On Shopify Plus, this is handled through a native B2B login portal. On lower-tier plans, you have to use apps or theme customizations to hide the wholesale templates behind specific customer tags.
Make them prove who they are.
Exactly. A logged-in wholesale buyer should only ever see one number on the screen, and that is their specific negotiated price. But gating the catalog only protects your leverage before the sale is made. Once they physically have your product, you need strict policies to protect your retail floor. You need an MSRP and an MAP.
Okay, let's define those clearly, because merchants mix them up constantly, and the legal implications are massive. MSRP is the manufacturer's suggested retail price. It is simply a friendly suggestion. It's the price you put on your line sheets to show the buyer what the product should theoretically sell for to hit their margins.
Yes, and it is always completely legal to suggest a price to a retailer. But MAP, minimum advertised price, is a strict control mechanism. It dictates the absolute lowest price a retailer is allowed to advertise your product for in public.
In public, that's the key.
Right. They can technically sell it for less in the quiet of their physical brick-and-mortar store, but they cannot put a lower price on a billboard, in an email blast, or on a website.
But the mechanism of how you enforce MAP involves very strict legal boundaries, especially in the U.S. context under the Sherman Act. Why is MSRP a friendly suggestion while MAP borders on complex antitrust law?
It really comes down to the difference between a unilateral policy and a cartel agreement. Under the Sherman Act, it is completely illegal for a manufacturer and a retailer to sit down and agree on a set resale price. That is called vertical price fixing, and regulators view it as anti-consumer because it artificially inflates market prices.
So you can't have them sign a contract promising not to lower the price.
Exactly. You cannot enforce MAP through a negotiated contract. However, as a brand, you have the legal right to choose who you do business with. So MAP must be a unilateral policy.
How does that look in practice?
You, the manufacturer, publicly announce your MAP policy to all buyers. You say, this is our minimum advertised price. We are not asking you to agree to it. But if we catch you advertising below this price, we will unilaterally cut you off and refuse to fulfill your future purchase orders. You enforce MAP by taking action to protect your brand, not by signing a price-fixing contract.
That is a fascinating legal tightrope, which means the most practical advice I can give you, the listener, right now is this. Go to your computer, log out of your Shopify admin entirely, open an incognito browser window, and audit your own site. Click around like a complete stranger. If you can see wholesale prices, compare at prices, or bulk discount tiers bleeding over into your retail shopping experience, well, fix it immediately before you try to scale. It is the easiest mistake to make, and it is by far the most expensive to ignore.
Absolutely, you have to lock that down.
So what does this all mean? If we step back and look at the entire life cycle mapped out in this deep dive, it boils down to this. Wholesale pricing isn't some dark art. It is a highly repeatable formula. First, you never guess the number. You pick the structural model, the chassis. Second, you run the brutal margin math and face the 6-cent reality check. Third, you enforce case packs so your minimum order quantities actually spread out your fixed costs. Fourth, you plug the operational leaks at checkout, like net 30 terms and retail freight rules. And finally, you legally protect your retail floor with a unilateral MAP policy and deeply gated catalogs.
That is the perfect summary. And it is vital to remember that whether you are on a basic Shopify plan using third-party apps to hack this workload together, or you are running a massive enterprise operation on Shopify Plus using their native B2B tools, the underlying arithmetic simply does not change. A $5.50 fixed fulfillment cost will eat your margin alive, regardless of what software tier you are paying for each month.
Yeah, setting wholesale prices on Shopify really isn't about just slapping a 50% discount on retail and hoping the volume makes up for the loss. It's about meticulously engineering a transaction where both the buyer and the supplier win, and your business actually survives the fulfillment process.
Definitely. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a forward-looking thought based on everything we've unpacked today.
Oh, what's that?
Well, throughout this entire discussion, we've talked entirely about static policies, setting strict rules, running Excel spreadsheets, and relying on human negotiations to protect these fragile margins. But what happens to your carefully crafted MAP policies and your net terms when AI agents start dynamically negotiating these B2B contracts in real time?
Wow, that would change everything.
Exactly. Imagine an AI instantly reading your live warehouse inventory levels and your absolute baseline margin floors and negotiating a custom price with a buyer's procurement AI in a matter of milliseconds. Will static published price lists even exist in 5 years? Or will every single wholesale checkout become an invisible algorithmic micro-negotiation? Something for you to ponder.